So I welcome everybody tonight to Engaging Return International Volunteers with Results. You've got on your screen before you just information on how to dial in and all that. And we may have a few other folks joining us. And so I'll start by just saying a little bit about why we're doing tonight's webinar. And really the idea is that there are many people in our communities who have done some sort of international volunteer experience. And the thing is, we just quite often don't know who they are. They may be, parts of faith communities. They may be returned Peace Corps volunteers, or from any number of other organizations that do international volunteer service. And a lot of those folks who go firsthand to see what's happening in the world, oftentimes seeing people and working with people in poverty, they come back to the United States and they find themselves in a situation where they may not quite know what to do with that experience, or how to bring it back home, or actually how to continue to do meaningful things in the areas that they were working in when they were gone. And so Zahara Heckscher is going to help us decipher that a little bit, demystify that, and help us find some of those people in our communities. And then also just want to note that this is excellent preparation for the September 21st call that we'll be having around the release of the 20th anniversary of Reclaiming Our Democracy with Sam Daly-Harris, Dr. Muhammad Yunus, and Joanne Carter. So this is a great way to sort of figure out how to do some outreach with people who might care about learning about the results model and care about the work that we're doing. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Zahara Heckscher. She is going to introduce herself a little bit and then lead us through this webinar.
Great. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you, Ken, and thanks. I think we have Carolyn and Pat with us, and I'm actually excited. Sometimes it's good to have a small group because we can go in depth a little more, and then people who listen in later can hear how these ideas will apply to some specific communities, and I think that will help them with their groups. So as you can see from my happy picture there, I have volunteered personally in Nicaragua, Zambia, and Zanzibar. And I think I, like many people who go to volunteer overseas, start out with the idea that you're going to go and do some help. And then I, really had my eyes opened in Nicaragua. I was volunteering during the time of the Sandinistas. It was pretty clear that a lot of the problems were originating in the United States. And in Zambia, I saw the awful effects of structural adjustment. Let me stop for a second. I'm hearing an echo. Can folks hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll carry on.
I've muted the other lines for the time being. If any of you had any questions, just type it into the chat window.
Great. Yes. So I'll keep my eyes on the chat to monitor if anyone says they're having trouble hearing me. So I saw very clearly, especially in Africa, the effect of U.S. policies, including World Bank programs that were forcing kids to pay for education, and the negative effect of some misguided food aid policies. And I really came back believing that the most important thing about volunteering overseas is what you do when you get home. And I think that's a pretty typical process for international volunteers, and when it comes to the Peace Corps actually has a specific part of its mission to engage its return volunteers in work in the United States, bringing the world back. So the focus here for me is bringing what I've learned about international volunteering from my experiences and from writing a book about international volunteering, combining that with my passion for results. I've been involved with results for almost 20 years, I think, just as a volunteer here with the D.C. office, doing little projects here and there, and I wanted to bring those two things together. So that's the genesis of this work I've been doing with Ken. So today we're going to have a very simple agenda. We'll do quick goals of the webinar, and then I'm going to share 5 tools with you. So that's going to be the main thing, and we'll have discussion and Q&A throughout. And the chat feature on the computer will be really helpful for me, so please chime in there if, for example, I'm going too fast or you need me to repeat something, anything is unclear, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just a little background on me. And then for the webinar, my goal is to give you more tools in your outreach toolkit, tools you can use right away, specifically diving into new ways to engage return volunteers, and then focus all of this on leading up to September 21st. And I know from the registration form that most of you are planning to do something on the 21st. So that's those are the top goals, and I'm really not going to talk about outreach for outreach's sake. We're going to really focus on very, very, very targeted outreach, precision outreach, I'm calling it. So you can look at the tip of the outreach arrow there on the bullseye. That's what we're focusing on, as precise as we can be. So the next few slides are things that you know as results volunteers, but I think it's good to ground the conversation about return volunteers in the general principles of results outreach and recruitment. And I'm hoping each of you can type in one thing that you have, one way you have benefited from your involvement with results, either with skills or community, or just a sense of satisfaction. And this will also help me make sure that everyone's with us and able to use the meeting chat, which has a little spot at the bottom for you to type. So I'd love to see a couple words there on any way that you've benefited from your work with results. And I'm not seeing it, so Ken, can you unmute, and let's just see if people can chime in.
Are we on mute?
You're unmuted.
I'm unmuted.
You're unmuted. Is that Len?
Well, this is Lenny, and I guess I'm on the phone and not on the web, so I apologize for that. But I was away for a couple of weeks up in upstate New York, and with a very good friend of mine that I grew up with, and who's always been very active in his community. And I supported him. He wanted to come to the conference this past July, but he and his wife couldn't make it. So I said, well, make an appointment with your congressperson in your local district anyway, because that's the whole purpose anyway. And so today was the day that he went to his local office and met face-to-face with his congressperson, who's a first-term Republican, and had such an exciting meeting. He didn't know about education for all. He didn't know about child nutrition. And he already responded to my friend by email, seeing him about make sure his staff has the bill on his desk when he gets back. So that whole thing about when we visit, thinking that they know about it, when they have probably not seen it, not heard about it, unless somebody asked them to look at it. So that, to me, is what results really has always been about, or not very powerful. Is that clear?
Thank you, Lenny. Yeah, extremely clear, and I think you capture one of the main benefits for anyone that gets involved in results. It gives us power to make a difference. And I wanted to to ground us with a story, and you did that beautifully, to remind us when we're inviting other people to get involved with results, we're giving them the chance to experience this power for themselves. And I think it's all, it's like kind of like when you ask someone for money, it's good to think about how good it feels when you yourself give money to a good cause. And it's the same with asking people to get involved with results. So that story really illustrated that beautifully. On a related note, some of the people out there who aren't yet involved with results, they need something like results in their lives. So when you do outreach, you're kind of being a matchmaker between the needs of your group and the needs of those people out there who may not yet have a way to use their power to create change. So they want to do something, they don't know how they can do it. And some of them don't have the kind of skills that you've developed as results activists. So it's important to ground yourself in the fact that people out there have needs as well, and you're giving them an opportunity to meet those needs through engagement with this wonderful organization. Okay, so that's kind of our background, grounding ourselves in the assumptions. Now to dive in a little more to specific tools. So with outreach, this gets to the precision outreach. And I've spoken with activists from around the country, and the grassroots groups tend to have specific needs that are specific to their own community. So in some places, one of the groups I talked to, almost everyone in the group was quite old, and some of them weren't as able to be as active anymore. They had kind of a succession issue. They needed to recruit some younger people, and for them, younger meant people in their 40s, 50s, even 60s. And that was a very clear goal. It didn't mean they needed young people, right out of high school or college, but they needed to think about the future life of their group. A replacement for members who've moved away, a critical mass. A few groups are just hanging on with just a few people, and then quite a few need special constituencies. So an example here might be if the congressperson in your district is Christian and most of your members are Jewish, you might want to try to find some members from that faith background, or vice versa. And geography, a lot of our chapters are in densely populated communities where there may be several congressional districts relatively nearby, and the group wants to get some folks involved from other nearby congressional districts. When you look at the goals, and this, for those of you who printed out the handouts, the goal section is on page 4. There's a lot of detail about goals, and I just gave you a little sample here, and we want to be realistic with the goals. So with the sample here, the idea was to get one really active group member by the end of the year who comes from the north side of town where the congressman lives. This is hypothetical, but I'm sure each of you can apply this to your own reality. Willing to do media work, in your case, it may be someone who wants to do meetings with the congresspeople, but wherever the gap is in your group, it's really helpful to actually write that down before you start inviting return volunteers or anyone else for that matter to come to your group. So this gets us back to our precision, creating precision goals and then writing those goals down so you and the other people in your group are extremely clear about what you want and why you want in your outreach, so you're targeted. And as you know, with the process here, to get one long-term results member might take sending emails to 500 people. It might take 100 phone calls inviting people to come to a meeting. It might take 30 people actually at a meeting for one results member to come to become an actual long-term engaged volunteer. And Ken, I would actually like you to chime in here. What do you think of my numbers, or anyone else? Do you think these look like the right numbers in terms of one long-term member per maybe 30 people coming to an event?
You folks are all unmuted, and welcome you to chime in on that as well. I think it varies, but I think 30 people coming to an event, you might actually get a couple of people depending on who has come to the event. Out of 30, you might get a couple of folks out of 30 people that have come. I think the point here is that basically that you have to ask a lot of people to check their interests in order to find the ones that are, and because nobody has it written on their forehead. And so I guess to this process, you have to count on a lot of, well, this is not really my thing, or I'm not really interested. So you have to count on a lot of no's, and it's not because we're failures that people say no. It's because you just haven't found the right people. So I think that point. But I'd certainly welcome anybody else's comments on that as well. Carol, Pat, Lenny.
Yeah, this is Carol. Yeah, there are a lot of no's, and as you say, it's not because you're not asking well. It's because it's not the right person at the right time yet. So.
That's right, and I think we're going to move now to talking about pre-qualified potential volunteers, and this should help skew the numbers a little more towards a higher number of people who get involved per people you talk to, but it's still not going to be everyone. Results is not for everyone. I think of it as a Margaret Mead organization. It's the small group of committed people. So how do we build that small group? Did someone else want to say something before I move on? Okay, so one of our key tools here is pre-qualified results members. And I'm going to spend a little more time on this section because this is where I'm going to dive in deep to engaging returned international volunteers. So when you think about your best result members, what are the qualities you think of? And then taking that to the next step, when you think of who you would like as a new member, what are the qualities of those people? And again, I'm gonna ask Ken, because he has so much experience with local activists, what are a couple words that come to mind for you, Ken, for your best results activists?
Passionate, determined. I think that, passionate and determined.
Okay, passionate and determined. Okay, so we're gonna come back to that when we talk about international volunteers, and if anyone has other qualities, I'm actually only seeing me and Ken on the chat, so I'm wondering if the chat feature isn't working for folks. But let's see, since people are unmuted, are there any other qualities? Again, thinking about your very best volunteers. Okay, so I'm going to move to this concept of pre-qualified. So we know from results, we know you have to be not only passionate and determined, you have to be willing to show up to meetings. You have to have some basic skills and a willingness to learn new skills. You have to have some time. You have to be able to work with others, not just a loner. So where do we find those kind of people? And I like to use the metaphor of the pool. That first you know what kind of fish you're looking for, and then you're going to the right pool. So at the pool where I swim, we have a hot tub, we have the athletic pool, and then we have the leisure pool. The leisure pool is where mature people tend to swim, people whose kids are grown, they have the 50 and older class, people with spare time, people who are active, people who are fairly disciplined. They may be a little older, but they're still out there. Those are the potential results activists. Now, I'm not going to go there to recruit my results activists, but I think that metaphor works well when you think about what pool are you going to fish in to get those volunteers. So the rest of the seminar I'm going to focus on fishing in the pool of returned international volunteers. And I made my own list of what I think makes good results members, and we can add to that passionate and determined. And as you can see on the right side, many of the qualities that make really good results activists are the same exact qualities that you'll find in a pool of returned volunteers or alumni from different volunteer programs. These are compassionate people. They want to be engaged in their community and other communities. They have some time, and most people who've gone overseas and volunteered have had some connection with the kind of issues that Results works on against poverty. And then finally, they tend to be action-oriented people. So a couple of caveats about this pool. So people who have recently returned from volunteering, especially from a long-term volunteer program like the Peace Corps, may be a little disoriented when they first come back off the plane. They may even be physically sick from all those crazy bacteria that exist, in the water in other places. So you don't want to recruit return volunteers who are fresh off the boat. The other caveat is that a lot of people who volunteer are really, really interested in that direct service piece, directly helping people one-on-one. And some of them can understand, get their heads around the importance of policy change to go hand-in-hand with individual help. Others find the policy stuff a little too not directly connected enough to helping people. We know it's vital. Those of us who work with Results, we understand those connections. Not everyone can, and so some return volunteers aren't really going to be able to make that jump quite as easily. And then finally, a lot of the programs tend to have younger people. Young people can make wonderful Results volunteers, but then they move. So that's something you just need to think about as any recruitment of younger people. You need to think about the value, the pros and cons of different ages in your group. Okay, so having said that, overall, this is a really good pool for Results. So the first strategy here, probably the easiest one for us in the United States, is to connect with returned volunteers from the Peace Corps. As I think all of you know, Ken returned from service. Where was your service, Ken?
I was in Niger in West Africa.
In Niger. Okay, so as folks might know, the Peace Corps has a wonderful national organization. It's actually independent from the government, the peacecorps.gov, but it's a group of alumni from Peace Corps experiences. And you can go to the website, and the link is here, and find the local Peace Corps chapter, Return Peace Corps alumni chapter in your area. Not every area has an alumni program, but many, many of them do. And if your area doesn't, I'll share some tips a little later for finding Return Peace Corps volunteers in the absence of an actual chapter. But a very first and easy step to engage Return alum is to contact the leader of your local Peace Corps chapter, Return Peace Corps chapter. So here's just one example. Florida actually has a couple of Return Peace Corps volunteer associations, one in the north, one in the south, and with just a couple minutes of research, I found their website and the contact information for the leadership of the organization. So that, folks, is the low-hanging fruit from this webinar. If you do one thing, if you remember one thing, it's to look up the chapter of Return Peace Corps alum in your area. There's also, going one step.
Real quickly, I don't know if you're going to mention their Facebook pages.
Yes, there's Facebook pages. If you go back, and I'll just go back here for a second to the first link I put, Peace Corps Connect member group includes links to the Facebook pages as well as the official websites for those organizations that have them. Okay? So some of the Facebook pages, you have to be a member of the group to see the page, but you could just go directly to Facebook and look for it that way rather than entering it through the site. So you might have to be a bit of a sleuth with some of this. And as you know, season results activists, often you have to pick up the phone. So if the website's out of date, you can always do your detective work and start making some phone calls. Now, speaking of phone calls, one of the really interesting ways to go about getting to these Return Peace Corps volunteers is through the master's programs. Peace Corps around the country works with specific universities where return volunteers can come back and get their master's degrees. Oftentimes the administrators running the programs are themselves Peace Corps alum. So students, I know from talking with Ken, aren't always the best results volunteers. They're good as auxiliary members, but because of the transient issues, they wouldn't necessarily be a core group. But these programs, these master's programs, will really put you in touch, not just with the students, but also the associated adults around these master's degree programs. So I'm going to share for DC. Do we have, let's see, our DC person who was going to be on the call was Colleen, but I don't think Colleen is with us. So we'll come back to this when we talk about the Laurel chapter and some of the returned Peace Corps programs that they can connect with through the master's degree program. Okay, in addition, so that's A. Peace Corps is huge in this country, one of the biggest volunteer sending organizations. But there are actually hundreds of organizations that send volunteers overseas each year. Thousands if you also count mission trips run by individual churches. But there's two associations that have networks for the larger volunteer sending organizations. That's the Building Bridges Coalition and the International Volunteer Placement Association. Both of these have member lists, and again, the links are right here. And as your second step of outreach after Peace Corps, I would encourage you to just scroll through the member list, looking at those organizations and identify which of the organizations are in your community specifically. Now we have Carol Houston on the phone from New York. So Carol, I'm going to give you an example here.
Okay.
Relevant to your community. Carol, are you already in touch with Cross Cultural Solutions?
Say that again? I didn't hear it.
Okay. Are you in touch with Cross Cultural Solutions?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so I'll go into a little more detail here. Cross Cultural Solutions is the director of Cross Cultural Solutions is Steve Rosenthal, and Steve is not only the director of that organization, he used to be involved as a results volunteer, and he's totally committed to getting his alum involved in results, and he has a robust alumni network of returned volunteers from his program in the New York area. They're actually, the organization is, they take volunteers from all over the country, but because they're actually based in New Rochelle, I think, but they have tons of volunteers with cross-cultural solutions from Manhattan and other boroughs. So you'll see in the little chat room, I just sent you Steve's email address. He knows me, he knows Ken, he knows results. I'm fairly certain he would be interested in co-sponsoring the event. He knows Sam Harris as well, Sam Daly Harris as well. So, so this is just an example because I knew you were going to be on the call. I put this together ahead of time. But for folks in other locations, this is a nice task. Even for someone who doesn't come to a lot of meetings, you could assign one of your group members to go through the member list of Building Bridges and the International Volunteer Placement Association and identify which of these organizations are based in your state. These are wonderful networks. IVPA I'm particularly fond of because they're exclusive. They have high quality of standards, but the Building Bridges Coalition is a larger organization and a little more comprehensive. You can see in the chat now, I've also sent for Carol the contact information for American Jewish World Service. American Jewish World Service actually continued their volunteer program, but I believe they still have an active alumni network, and Sam, whose email I included there, will be able to advise you on how to get in touch with that volunteer network and, invite those to come out to I think your event was maybe going to be September 29th. Is that right?
That's right. Yes. Great. Good information.
So now with these two, I'm giving you a head start, Carol. But for others listening in, you'll find a warm reception when you call these organizations and tell them about results. Most of them got involved in this work because they care about the exact same issues that you care about. I'm talking now about the administrators of the organization. So you call them up and you ask them about their, how they organize their alumni, and you tell them about results and have a specific ask. You all are seasoned activists, so you always want to have a specific ask. In this case, your ask might be to invite their folks to come out to your September 21st event. And I'm a big believer in scripts for phone calls. So on your Word document, the handout that went along with this packet, I gave you a little sample call script on page 10 for calling the headquarters of an organization and asking to speak with its alumni director. And Ken just reminded folks the weekly update has the packet attached. It's also on the page for the event on the 21st. Okay, the next strategy I'm going to share is just your own existing membership. So you can do this through a short email, even a Facebook post. Who has volunteered overseas? And you'll find probably one or two results members in your group. Maybe they weren't Peace Corps, maybe they volunteered with another organization, but if they are a return volunteer, they probably are part of the alumni network for that organization and would be willing to advise you on how to get members of that group involved. This is going into some specifics for Laurel. You can see the Peace Corps has a program at the University of Maryland, and with just a little quick 10-minute research, I found the contact information for the Coverdell program at Maryland, and also the Peace Corps recruiter. Now, recruiting is not alumni, but the Peace Corps recruiter will be able to connect you with various alumni programs. He is also the recruiter at the University of Maryland, which has a huge Peace Corps contingent and therefore a huge Peace Corps alumni contingent. Okay, so that's we're talking now about swimming in the right pool. So what's the hook? Once you've identified let's say you're Peace Corps returned alum and another group like Cross Cultural Solutions has alumni network in your area, what's the next step? And the tool that I recommend is what I call dual purpose outreach events. Dual purpose because I'm thinking back to 30 people coming to the event and one becoming a long-term member, or maybe 10 people coming and none of those 10 becoming a long-term member. What can you do so that it's still a successful event? So when you think of outreach events, you want to think of events that will serve your results, the other goals of your chapter, in addition to outreach. So that might be fundraising, skills building, new organizational partnerships, and action groups such as the skills building session where you actually write a letter to the editor as part of that action, in addition to recruiting new members. That way, even if the members even if no one becomes a long-term member, maybe you'll get a few on your email action list, and the event could still be successful. September 21st events really is going to lend itself to dual purpose, and it gives you a nice venue to start to involve returned international volunteers. So for some of you, you might actually end up wanting to seek a co-sponsorship, let's say by your local Peace Corps alumni group. For others of you, you might just want some help in getting a return volunteers to attend the event. But here, what we're looking at is using the event to build relationships with return international volunteers who might become those key long-term engaged results members, but also staying grounded in the other goals of the event. I know from our little survey that everyone who responded is planning to do something on the event on the 21st or the 29th in the case of New York. And I think you need to first be really, really clear about what your group wants the event to look like. So that's a separate call. It's kind of a separate track, but the key thing is making sure you first know what you're doing around that event, and then think about what makes sense for your outreach. So that could be inviting individual return volunteers, asking a group to invite their member, maybe even getting a speaker for someone who could come to the event and say something to the whole group before the session with Sam and Dr. Eunice and Joanne, or co-sponsorship. Co-sponsorship is a strategy that I like as an organizer because you're asking for a little more than just send out this email. And Results is all about doing more than sending out an email. So when I ask a group to co-sponsor an event, I'm asking them to commit to send the invitation to their list. You could even ask them to commit to send it twice, and then have a leader of the group attend the event so that when they send the invite to the list, they're going to say, and Jonas Smith is going to be there and be doing a little presentation. That will make it more likely that their members come, and ask them to stay afterwards, and of course lend their name to the flyer and promotional material. So this co-sponsorship won't make sense for all of you, but for those who have, let's say, a very active Peace Corps chapter in your area, or for the New York group, which has Steve Rosenthal and Cross Cultural Solution, I think co-sponsorship is a nice strategy that can launch a longer-term relationship by starting with the September 21st event. So that's co-sponsorship. In the handouts, I've given you tons of adaptable script, and it's in a Word document so you can cut and paste. So we talked about the script for a phone call, but I also gave you some script for inviting individuals, for forwardable emails, and for asking for co-sponsorship. So that's all in the Word document. Okay, so that was our third tool, dual purpose events. I'm going to go quickly through the last two tools and then see what questions and comments we have. So getting a buddy, accountability is key. We're all already very busy. As results activists, you have many other things on your plate as well. I would encourage each of you to share a couple of key things you learned from this presentation today with someone else in your group, so you have someone else to bounce ideas off. When I talked to the group in Texas, they had come to my presentation at the conference, and they had formed a little small group of people that were actually implementing some of these ideas that we've talked about. So they were inviting their local Peace Corps chapter and some of the other groups based in their area. But they had several people doing it. So I encourage you not to do this all by yourself. Talk to your group members, and ideally have one other person who you do this hand in hand with. And then the last tool is the handout, the little guidebook or workbook that is also linked to today's email. So when you go to bed tonight, you have your choice, your sad novel, which will make you cry, or a printout of the guidebook that I put together. I encourage you to look through the guidebook. There's a lot of juicy stuff there. We only had an hour on the call, so I couldn't go through every detail of everything that's in the guidebook, but I think when you look through it, you'll be able to highlight one or two things that you will immediately and easily be able to put to use in your local area. And then just have a quick recap, and then we'll go through to some more questions and discussion. So recap of our tools: setting clear outreach goals, figuring out who's pre-qualified.
I have a question, Zahara.
I'm sorry?
There's a question here. There's a question from somebody on the line. Yes, is there a question? Oops, I guess not. Go ahead, Zahara.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, sure. That's
Mm-hmm.
okay. No worries. This is just a quick recap here. Setting clear goals, figuring out who's pre-qualified here with a focus on international volunteers, dual purpose events, a buddy, and then the complete handout. That's the end of the content that I had to share, but I'm hoping we can have a little more discussion about how this might apply in your specific areas. So let's see any questions we have.
So I'm going to go ahead and unmute your lines, and I would encourage you, if you're not speaking, to mute it yourself manually so we don't get feedback, but I'm going to go ahead and unmute all the lines right now. So if you have questions or comments for Zahara, go ahead.
And I'm going to just send for the Northern Virginia group a little text with a link there for one of the Peace Corps groups for Northern Virginia. Colleen in D.C., I don't think could join us, but she is a Peace Corps alum herself. So for Pat and for Len, I would encourage you to reach out to your D.C. friend, Colleen McCracker, and get her personal contact in your name. As you have available within results. Ken, maybe can you talk a little bit about your conversations with the Building Bridges Coalition?
Sure. In speaking with the folks from the Building Bridges Coalition, I mean, they're very interested in partnering with Results, and we're still figuring out exactly how that's going to work. I mean, the relationship with Return International Volunteers is a complementary one, not really a competitive one. It's one where quite often these organizations are trying to figure out how to support their alumni who come back from these great international experiences, because these are the folks that have seen what poverty perhaps looks like in the world. They've actually worked in some of the areas where we advocate, education, health, or oftentimes microfinance, and so they're very keen on the idea of having meaningful work or meaningful volunteer work for their alumni to do. So we've gotten started in the conversation about how to make that connection, perhaps how to provide some webinars and information on results, more specifically some training for their return volunteers as a way to help them make the bridge to advocacy. So that's some of that work.
And I think one of the take-homes is just how excited they were about results and about this possible partnership on the top level. Any other questions?
Well, and this is Pat, and I just wanted to comment. I think that the person you're directing us to is Colleen McCracken.
Yeah.
Right? Pardon me?
Colleen McCracken.
I'm not understanding the last name, and maybe it's just my ears. But
McCracken. It's Bruce McCracken's niece or daughter,
okay.
I believe.
Oh, okay. And Colleen is actually going with us to Representative Delaney's tomorrow, so I will ask her more. We'll be together for part of the afternoon. So that's wonderful. Thank you for that connection.
Isn't that wonderful? Obviously I didn't know that when I mentioned her name. I just had a feeling she would be a wonderful resource for you. So that's some great synergy, and I just posted up the spelling of her name on the comment field, on the chat field. And she did her Peace Corps service, I think, in India, and she also involved Mary Patz from Maryland, who is another Peace Corps alum. So I think Colleen will end up being an important person for results, especially in the D.C. area, for thinking about really engaging those returned Peace Corps volunteers. Because honestly, the Peace Corps doesn't give quite enough to do aside in terms of advocacy, except for advocacy for more money for the Peace Corps. And many Peace Corps volunteers will do more than that with their advocacy.
I just had another comment, and that is that it looked as though you all did a good bit of work for the IC, because we also had Mary Pat Brennan, I believe is her last name, who was in the Peace Corps some years ago and went lobbying with us, brought pictures of her experiences. It was awesome. So thank you.
Yeah, that's actually Colleen, I think, was the one who brought Mary Pat in. And what you just brought up is something I hadn't even mentioned. Those volunteers will add a real depth to your congressional meetings and to your media work, because they have those firsthand stories. They've lived this. They've lived the issues directly. And they're still in touch with their friends overseas, most of them. So that's a really important point that I had forgotten to mention. Thank you. We're getting close to the end of the session. Are there any other questions or comments? In that case, I'm going to turn it back to Ken to just remind people about all the resources for the book release party and wrap us up. So thank you to everyone for joining, and thanks to Ken for setting this event up.
And thank you very, very much.
Absolutely. Zahara, I really appreciate the time that you put into this and the expertise and experience that you bring into this. Thank you for sharing that with us. Thanks for personalizing it for results so that we can really work on finding the people who are really looking for us, finding those pre-qualified people. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, this will be very useful information and tools for the book party events on September 21st. I also want to point out that the book parties on September 21st are an interesting twist on results. We typically, as we're talking about results to people, we lead with an issue. With having Sam Daly Harris, the founder of Results, and Muhammad Yunus and Joanne Carter on the phone with us that night, we're actually leading with the results model. We are talking about how this particular way of engaging in our democracy has been effective for over 30 years in moving the needle on poverty, and also now how it is also moving the needle on climate change, engaging people on climate change using the very same model. So we are leading with the model on this, and I also think that if you're able to bring some people who have done international volunteer service or any sort of service to your meeting that night, they get a chance to hear the author on the phone, pick up the book, and if you get them reading that book, they are really going to understand results. And there's a very good chance they're going to say, I get this, I really want a piece of this. There are great stories in the book, and the model is well explained in the book itself. You may even decide to have after your book party event, you may decide to do a book club conversation of the book itself or chapters within the book. So that's a good follow-on event as well. I think that's it. All I have to say, and again, I really appreciate all that you put into this, Zahara, and for sharing your expertise with us. Thanks for folks who joined tonight, and we've recorded this, and hopefully a lot of other folks will find this useful as well. So thanks, and have a great night.
Great.
Thanks,
Ken. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.